The galactic dining court was buzzing, filled with the soft hum of translators and murmurs of alien tongues that blended into an otherworldly symphony. Rows of alien dignitaries from all corners of the universe sat at the long tables, their bizarre, towering forms glittering under the blue-green light of the sky domes. The grand hall of Kallix Prime, the dining capital of the galaxy, was awash with anticipation. Tonight was the annual tasting a showcase where the finest chefs from across the universe would display their culinary prowess. At the head of the grand hall, the Exalted Council of the Unnamable Palate sat high above the rest, their sharp, multi-lensed eyes sweeping the crowd with an air of casual arrogance. The council was an intimidating group alien gourmands whose taste buds were legendary across the galaxy. Their verdict could make or break entire planetary cuisines. Most importantly, they had one unshakable belief: humans could not cook. Galactic, a towering insectoid critic from the planet Zarxa, clicked his mandibles in disdain as he scanned the dishes that had been presented so far. His 7 limbs tapped impatiently on the metal armrest. Beside him, Zorvax of Coral, a translucent being whose jelly-like body rippled with irritation, was shaking its amorphous head. Human cuisine, Galactic rasped, his voice like metal grinding on stone, is an insult to taste. How they even dare to bring their dishes here is beyond me. Zorvax let out a moist, gurgling laugh. They're primitive. Their palate lacks the complexity needed to understand flavor. Their food is bland. We all know it. Others on the council snickered, their whispers rising into the air. The universal truth in the culinary galaxy was this: humans were unsophisticated, their food too simple to deserve a place on the galactic stage. Any human chef who dared to show their work here would be laughed off the stage, as many had before. But in the kitchen, standing in front of a modest station, a human chef was preparing for his moment. Anthony Cole was no fool. He had heard the rumors. He had seen the sneers from his fellow chefs, some human, some not, and the casual dismissal of his people's cooking. He knew the council despised human cuisine, believed it was barely a step above sustenance paste, but Cole was undeterred. His hands moved with steady precision, chopping, seasoning, stirring, all while his mind raced through the plan. He had spent months studying the bizarre palates of the galaxy, learning how to take the familiar tastes of Earth and transform them into something unforgettable. The door to the kitchen swung open, and a tall, silver-skinned alien with crystalline eyes, Dvorak, the master of ceremonies, stepped inside. "Chef Cole," he said in a melodic tone, "are you certain you wish to proceed? You do understand the risk of presenting human cuisine to the Council of the Unnamable Palate." Anthony didn't look up from his work. "I'm aware." Dvorak tilted his head, intrigued by the human's lack of hesitation. "You're a brave one," he said, "but bravery alone won't save you from their laughter." "Who said anything about laughter?" Anthony replied, finally looking up. His gaze was calm, almost serene, as if he held a secret no one else in the room knew. Dvorak studied the human for a moment longer before giving a curt nod. "Your turn is next. Good luck." As Dvorak left the room, Anthony felt a presence at his side. He turned to see his sous chef, a hulking creature named Margot, a Viridian with scaled skin and massive, clawed hands that belied his delicate touch in the kitchen. "They're going to tear you apart," you know, Margot said in a low growl, though there was no malice in his voice, just concern. "Maybe," Anthony said with a small smile. "Or maybe they won't know what hit them." Margot grunted, his dark eyes flashing. "I hope you're right, human." Back in the dining hall, the air was thick with the scent of exotic spices, sulfuric broths, and sizzling proteins from distant worlds. The council had just finished critiquing a dish from a chef of Talxar, a delicate arrangement of bioluminescent fungi paired with a living gelatin that altered its flavor with every bite. Impressive, Galactic mused, clicking his mandibles together, but still, nothing groundbreaking. Dvorak appeared at the front of the room, his voice carrying over the crowd. "Next we have a chef from Earth, Anthony Cole, representing human cuisine." The crowd immediately began to murmur. Some of the alien chefs exchanged amused glances, while others shook their heads in pity. There had been whispers that Cole had managed to secure a spot in the competition through sheer persistence, not skill. Ah, this should be entertaining, Zorvax gurgled, his gelatinous body jiggling with mirth. Let's see what kind of bland soup or unseasoned meat he brings us. The door to the kitchen opened, and Anthony emerged, wheeling a cart with several covered dishes. His face was calm, his posture relaxed. There was no sign of nerves, no hint that he cared about the judgment that was about to be passed on him. Margot followed behind, carrying an assortment of utensils and plating tools, his large frame towering over Anthony's more slender figure. Anthony stopped in front of the council and nodded respectfully. "Exalted Council members," he said, his voice firm but polite. "Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present something different. I know human cuisine has been dismissed in the past, but I think you'll find that there's more to it than meets the eye." Grellick leaned forward, his antennae twitching. "Get on with it, human. Show us what you believe is worthy of our esteemed palates." Without a word, Anthony lifted the first cloche, revealing a dish of what appeared to be simple noodles, topped with a vibrant red sauce. There were no fancy garnishes, no exotic ingredients that shimmered or changed colors. It looked, for all intents and purposes, like an ordinary plate of spaghetti. The room erupted in laughter. "Spaghetti," Zorvax sputtered, his translucent form rippling with glee. "You've brought us spaghetti." Anthony didn't flinch. He picked up a fork, twirled a small portion of the noodles, and presented it to Grellick, who stared at it with visible disdain. Reluctantly, the insectoid alien took the bite, his mandibles clicking in annoyance as he chewed. The moment the sauce hit Grellick's taste buds, his entire body stiffened. His 7 limbs jerked, and his compound eyes widened. The rich, tangy flavor of tomatoes, balanced with the perfect blend of garlic, basil, and olive oil, exploded in his mouth. But that wasn't all. Anthony had infused the sauce with a rare spice from the planet Jormer, a spice that activated different taste receptors simultaneously, triggering a cascade of sensations that Grellick had never experienced before. For a moment, the room was silent as the council watched Grellick's reaction. Slowly, the insectoid critic lowered his fork, his mandibles moving cautiously as if testing whether the flavor was real. This is human food," Grellick rasped, his voice softer now. Anthony simply nodded. "One of Earth's classics." The other council members exchanged confused glances, clearly unsure of what to make of Grellick's sudden change in demeanor. Zorvax, determined not to be outdone, extended a gelatinous tendril and scooped a portion of the dish into his mass. The same thing happened. His form shuddered, his body glowing faintly as the flavor overwhelmed his senses. "It's complex," Zorvax admitted reluctantly. "I didn't expect this from Earth food." Anthony remained quiet as the rest of the council sampled the dish, each one reacting with varying degrees of surprise and confusion. The laughter that had filled the room earlier had all but vanished, replaced by murmurs of intrigue. Grellick cleared his throat, struggling to regain his composure. "Very well," he said, his voice a touch less arrogant than before. "You've made a passable first impression. But surely this is the best Earth has to offer, yes? A single trick." Anthony met Grellick's gaze without wavering. "I'm just getting started." The next dish was unveiled, a small, seemingly simple plate of roasted meat beef, specifically accompanied by a dark, glossy sauce. Again, there was nothing particularly extravagant about its appearance, but as the council tasted it, their reactions were immediate. The sauce had been enhanced with a concentrated form of the umari root, a galactic delicacy that heightened the perception of umami, making the meat's flavor more intense and savory than any of them had ever experienced. It was as if the very essence of taste had been distilled into the dish. "I don't understand," Zorvax muttered, his form flickering with disbelief. "How could something so ordinary create such a profound reaction?" Anthony allowed himself a small smile. Sometimes, simplicity can hide complexity. The final dish was the one that would push the council to their limits. Anthony uncovered a dessert, a rich, decadent chocolate cake, its surface gleaming under the lights. The aliens had never tasted chocolate before, and Anthony knew this would be the true test. One by one, the council members took cautious bites. And one by one, they froze, their expressions shifting from confusion to awe. The chocolate melted on their tongues, its bitterness perfectly balanced by sweetness, with undertones of spices from across the galaxy that Anthony had spent years sourcing. This is Grelic began, but he couldn't finish his sentence. Zorvax's entire body flickered with light, his gelatinous form quivering with emotion. Unbelievable, he whispered. The room was dead silent as the council took in the full impact of what they had just experienced. Finally, Grelic leaned back in his chair, his antennae drooping in defeat. It seems, he said slowly, we have been too hasty in dismissing human cuisine. Anthony stood tall, his expression unreadable. Thank you for giving it a chance. For the first time in centuries, the Council of the Unnamable Palate had nothing left to critique. The aftermath of Anthony's presentation spread like wildfire through the galaxy. Word of the human chef who had stunned the culinary world reached every corner of the universe. Suddenly, Earth cuisine was no longer a joke, it was revered. Restaurants across Kallix Prime scrambled to introduce Earth dishes to their menus, and Anthony was hailed as a visionary, his name spoken with respect even among the most jaded of critics. But for Anthony, it wasn't about the fame or the accolades. It was about something simpler, something truer, showing the universe that humans, despite their humble origins and unassuming nature, had more to offer than anyone had ever expected. In the end, it wasn't just the food that had changed the galaxy, it was the realization that greatness could come from the most unlikely places. As the weeks passed, Anthony found himself at the center of a whirlwind of invitations, interviews, and requests. Every renowned restaurant, culinary school, and intergalactic food network wanted a piece of him. Aliens of all shapes and sizes, some species he'd never even heard of, were clamoring to taste Earth cuisine, his cuisine. For the first time in the history of Kallix Prime, human food was not only respected but sought after. The transformation was surreal. Where once humans had been the punchline of jokes about primitive, flavorless cooking, they were now on the cutting edge of galactic dining. New Earth-inspired restaurants opened, and chefs from all over the planet traveled to Kallix Prime, eager to showcase their own interpretations of classic dishes. But for Anthony, none of this changed who he was. Amid the rising tide of fame, he remained in his small kitchen, working alongside Margot, refining his recipes and quietly pushing the boundaries of flavor. The sudden celebrity felt hollow compared to the thrill of creating something new, something that defied expectations. One evening, as Anthony was cleaning down his station after another long day, Margot approached him, his heavy footfalls reverberating through the quiet kitchen. Strange, isn't it? Margot rumbled. Not long ago they laughed at us. Now they treat you like a king. Anthony wiped his hands on a towel and looked out through the kitchen window. Beyond, he could see the glowing cityscape of Kallix Prime, a sprawling, alien metropolis where lights twinkled in patterns no human city ever could. Yet, there was a sense of belonging now, something he hadn't felt before. It's strange, Anthony agreed, but it's temporary. Margot raised a scaly brow. Temporary? You're at the top of the culinary galaxy. This could last for decades. Anthony shook his head, his expression calm but knowing. Fame like this? It fades. Something new will come along soon enough. That's how it works in any art. But that's not what matters. Margot snorted. Then what does? Anthony glanced back at his sous chef, smiling faintly. The work. The challenge of it. As long as I'm creating something new, as long as I'm pushing myself. That's enough. The galaxy can have its headlines. I just want to cook. The Viridian studied him for a moment before grunting in approval. You're a strange one, human. I've been called worse, Anthony chuckled. Just as Margot was about to respond, the kitchen door swung open, and Deverik stepped inside. His silver skin shimmered in the dim light, and his crystalline eyes seemed to glow with a sense of urgency. Chef Cole Deverik said, his voice melodic yet serious. I have news. Anthony set down his towel. What is it? The Exalted Council of the Unnamable Palate has extended a formal invitation to you, Devorik continued. They want you to cook for them again, but this time in the grand feast of the Eternal Court on Axion. Margot's eyes widened. The Eternal Court? That's the most exclusive event in the galaxy. Only the most powerful, the most influential beings attend that feast. The Council rarely even eats there, they just watch. It's a symbol of status and power. Devorik nodded. Precisely. It's an invitation unlike any other. You would be the first human chef to ever cook at the Eternal Court. Anthony's mind raced. The Eternal Court was more than just a culinary event, it was a gathering of the universe's elite, from rulers of entire planets to beings of such immense age and wisdom that they had long since ceased to concern themselves with anything so trivial as mortal affairs. It was the highest honor any chef could receive, but it was also the most daunting. What's the catch? Anthony asked, his brow furrowing. Devorik's shimmering eyes darkened slightly. There are rules, restrictions. The Eternal Court demands a level of perfection that few can achieve. One misstep, one wrong flavor, and you'll not only lose your reputation, you may lose far more than that. Margot growled low in his throat. It's not a simple feast, Cole. You're playing with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They don't take kindly to failure. Anthony considered this. The thought of cooking for such an audience filled him with equal parts dread and excitement. It was the ultimate test. He had already defied the odds once, could he do it again, on an even grander scale? Devorik watched him closely. What do you say, Chef Cole? Will you accept the challenge? Anthony took a deep breath, his fingers brushing the edge of the counter where he had spent so many hours creating, experimenting, perfecting. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, but it was not a burden, it was a thrill, a call to something greater. He looked at Devorik, his eyes steady. I'll do it. The journey to Axion was unlike anything Anthony had experienced. The planet itself was a jewel of the galaxy, its surface covered in sprawling, iridescent forests and towering crystalline spires that reached into the heavens. The Eternal Court was held in a citadel made entirely of shifting light and energy, an architectural marvel that defied logic and physics. As he stepped off the transport, Anthony felt the gravity of the moment settle around him. The beings gathered here were beyond powerful ancient entities whose presence alone warped reality. They moved through the citadel with an effortless grace, their forms varying from the monstrous to the ethereal. Some had no discernible shape at all, existing as pure energy or consciousness. Margot, who had accompanied him once again as his sous chef, looked uneasy. This place feels wrong, he muttered, glancing around at the alien figures that floated past them. Anthony couldn't disagree. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with a strange energy. But he pushed the feeling aside, focusing on the task at hand. In the heart of the citadel, a massive dining hall awaited. The table stretched endlessly, and at its head sat the Exalted Council, their multi-lensed eyes fixed on Anthony as he entered. Beyond them, the guests of the Eternal Court watched in silence, their expressions unreadable. Chef Kogrelic said, his voice echoing through the chamber, "You've proven yourself once before. But here, at the Eternal Court, the stakes are higher. Failure is not an option." "I understand," Anthony replied calmly. The council members exchanged glances before nodding. "Then begin." Anthony and Margot worked in silence, their movements synchronized as they prepared dish after dish. Anthony had planned meticulously for this. He had drawn on every resource, every ingredient the galaxy had to offer. But more than that, he had trusted in the simplicity of human cuisine. He knew that what had set him apart before was his ability to take the familiar and make it extraordinary. The first course was an earth salad, dressed with a tangy vinaigrette made from a rare fruit found only on Axion. The second was a delicate fish dish, seared to perfection and accompanied by a sauce that shimmered like liquid gold. Each dish was met with silent approval from the council, though their expressions gave nothing away. The pressure mounted with each course, but Anthony remained focused, his mind clear. Finally, the last dish was placed before the council, a dessert of chocolate and spiced fruits, drizzled with a syrup made from the essence of a flower that only bloomed once every century on a distant moon. The flavors were rich, complex, yet grounded in the simplicity of Earth's culinary tradition. Grellick took the first bite, his mandibles twitching slightly. Zorvax followed, his gelatinous body quivering as the flavor spread through him. The other council members ate in silence, their faces unreadable. For what felt like an eternity, the room remained still. Then, slowly, Grellick set down his fork and looked at Anthony. "You have done the impossible," Grellick said quietly. "You have brought something new to the Eternal Court. Something unforgettable." Zorvax nodded in agreement, his form flickering with approval. "We underestimated humans once. We will not make that mistake again." The room, which had been so tense moments before, suddenly erupted into applause, not the raucous clapping of hands, but a more refined, ethereal sound, as if the very air itself was applauding Anthony's achievement. As the exalted beings of the galaxy bowed their heads in respect, Anthony stood tall, his heart steady. He had done it. He had proven that human cuisine, once mocked, dismissed, and belittled, deserved a place among the greatest culinary traditions of the universe. And as he looked around the grand hall, he realized that this victory wasn't just his, it belonged to Earth, to every human chef who had been laughed at and underestimated. In the end, it wasn't just about food. It was about showing the galaxy that there was more to humans than anyone had ever imagined. Anthony Cole, the human chef who had changed galactic dining forever, smiled quietly to himself. There would be no more laughter at human cuisine.